Nevertheless, the U.S., including the Biden administration, insisted on beating the drums to admit Ukraine to NATO. Just last fall, you signed the U.S.-Ukraine Charter on Strategic Partnership, which renewed a commitment to the 2008 Bucharest Declaration supporting Ukrainian admission to NATO. Knowing full well that Ukraine was unlikely to ever join NATO since it had already been 14 years since they said they were going to become members, why was it so important last fall, before this invasion, to continue agitating for Ukraine's admission to NATO?
Thank you, Senator. Not a question of agitating for Ukraine's admission. It's a question of standing up for the basic principle that we strongly adhere to, that there should be and will be an open-door policy when it comes to NATO membership. These are sovereign decisions for European countries to make, and, of course, a decision for the NATO alliance to make in terms of making sure that a country that wishes to join actually adds value to NATO. But this goes to the heart of the international system and the international order, and part of that is a basic principle that one country can't dictate to another the choices it makes about with whom it allies, its foreign policies, its decision or not to try to engage with the European Union, with NATO. The other thing I'd
yet,
say, Senator,
as we speak and we see the destruction in Ukraine, we also hear pronouncements from President Zelensky saying, well, you know what, maybe we might consider neutrality as a possibility. There could have been voices before this invasion, instead of agitating for something that we knew our adversary absolutely hated and said was a red line as recently as last September, before you signed the agreement, once again agitating for NATO. Russia said that it was a red line. Now, there is no justification for the invasion. I'm not saying that. But there are reasons for the invasion, and I think it's added nothing. In fact, had Ukraine been in NATO, as you've advocated for and many others have advocated for, we would now have troops in Ukraine. Had they been, or are they to become part of NATO, that means U.S. soldiers will be fighting in Ukraine, and that's something I very much oppose.
Senator, could I just say to that, because look, these are important conversations and arguments. My judgment is different. If you look at the countries that Russia has attacked over the last years, Georgia, leaving forces in Transnistria and Moldova, and then repeatedly Ukraine, these were countries that were not part of NATO. It has not attacked NATO countries for probably a very good reason.
You could also argue the countries they've attacked were part of Russia.
Well,
we're part of the Soviet Union.
Yes, and I firmly disagree with that proposition. It is the fundamental right of these countries to decide their own future and their own destiny. And
I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying that the countries that have been attacked, Georgia and Ukraine, were part of the Soviet Union.
And that does not give
they
Russia
were part of
right
the
to attack
Soviet
them.
Union since the 1920s.
But that does not give Russia the right to attack them. On the contrary,
no one's saying it does, but it
they were
really has
liberated
nothing to do
from being part of this empire by force.
This is Rand Paul doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin and scolding the Secretary of State for, quote, agitating for something that would piss off the Kremlin, that something being respecting Ukraine's sovereignty as it sought to gain admission into NATO. In other words, instead of blaming Putin, who has agency and made the conscious decision to invade a sovereign country, a country that posed exactly zero threat to it, by the way, Rand Paul decided the blame actually lies with the United States for respecting Ukraine's sovereignty as it sought to gain entrance into NATO. I'm not saying Rand Paul is delivering Kremlin talking points on a silver platter, but yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. And even worse, Rand Paul then actually comes dangerously close to justifying Putin's invasion by offering up that the countries Putin chose to invade, from Georgia to Ukraine, were part of the Soviet Union. As if that's any justification. What is it, 1990? Who cares what country Ukraine and Georgia were part of 30 years ago? Except, of course, Putin, who's already made it abundantly clear that he still views these territories as the property of Russia. But that's based on nothing, on his own delusions of grandeur where Russia isn't some dying petrostate. Delusions that should be completely disregarded, and yet here we have a United States Senator validating those delusions on the Senate floor during a hearing with the U.S. Secretary of State. Not for nothing, but there is a reason that John McCain said this back in 2017.
Legislative session.
Mr. President,
Senator from Kentucky.
I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I note the senator from Kentucky leaving the floor without justification or any rationale for the action that he has just taken. That is really remarkable, that a senator blocking a treaty that is supported by the overwhelming number, perhaps 98 at least, of his colleagues would come to the floor and object and walk away. And walk away. The only conclusion you can draw when he walks away is he has no argument to be made. He has no justification for his objection to having a small nation be part of NATO that is under assault from the Russians. So I repeat again, the senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin. I yield the floor.
Yeah, guess not much has changed, huh? But this diatribe is indicative of a larger problem within the Republican Party. It's not just Rand Paul. Remember, there were 69 House Republicans who voted against Ukraine aid and 31 Senate Republicans who voted against Ukraine aid. This is for funding to help a sovereign country, a democracy, defend itself against a totalitarian dictator. If Russia won this war, it makes China stronger, it makes North Korea stronger, and it makes Western Europe, our allies, weaker. You would think that would be of at least some consequence to the Republican Party, which for decades has hid behind this notion that there's some defenders of the Constitution. In reality, all they're doing is betraying the fact that they're not at all interested in defending the Constitution and what it represents. They're actually just interested in consolidating power for themselves. And whoever will help them do that, like say Russia, should expect favorable treatment. Republicans don't want democracy, they want power. And one final note, Rand Paul and his pro-Putin talking points represents Kentucky about as well as I represent Antarctica. So if you want someone who actually cares about serving the people of Kentucky instead of those oligarchs and despots over in the Kremlin, check out Charles Booker. I have a very recent interview with him on the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel, because it is long past time that Americans across the political spectrum elect someone who's actually willing to fight for the people that they're supposed to serve. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.